Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. My name is Jacob, and this is episode 144. I'm here with Nolan. What's up, Nolan? How you doing?
Good night's sleep. Can't complain. Thanks for asking.
Nice. I also had a good night's sleep, so I can't complain either. All right, this week on the podcast, I had a great discussion with John D, who found himself in the midst of kratom addiction, ultimately ended up on 7-OH and went to rehab and was able to maintain sobriety from there. It was a really good discussion, and I'm looking forward to you all getting to hear it. One thing that you don't get to see on the podcast because we're audio only is what our guests look like, their demographics, etc. So John was the second, third, maybe fourth African-American person we've had on the podcast. And we do tend to get a lot of white men and white women, and we've had a little bit of diversity, but from what I can tell you is it is a very diverse community of addicts out there. Addiction affects all walks of life, all creeds, all colors, religions, sexual orientation. It doesn't matter. Anybody can find themselves trapped in kratom or 7-OH. So we're all susceptible to that. But I thought that was interesting because we do tend to skew more to the white demographic. We also don't get a lot of really young women. I think I've got an interview coming up with Natasha, who's a 23-year-old woman. And we had a couple younger ladies, but that's also a demographic we don't get much of. But we know you're out there. So if you're listening to this podcast, we just want you to know that you're not alone. We have had guests on with, your similar demographic breakdown most likely. And if we haven't, we'd love to have you on and hear your story. But I don't know, Nolan, have you seen a lot of diversity in the kratom addiction community?
That's a great question. And it's something I haven't thought a lot about until today. But now that I do think about it, it's interesting to highlight how, addiction, and especially kratom addiction, really doesn't discriminate. It's no matter how much money you have, no matter whether you're rich or you're poor or you're black or you're white, no matter your ethnicity, I think that we can all struggle with it in very much the same way. And I think that's one of the reasons that when you look at addiction recovery communities, especially the one that we've been trying to build here, there is no sense that anyone is an alien to getting support either from us or in the community when they're struggling with their addiction. And I think that's so important. No matter who you are, you should be entitled to the same degree of support from your fellow kratom quitters as anyone else.
Yeah, that's really good too to hit on the economics of it, because I know we've had some guests, like we've had a lawyer that was able to spend up to $200 a day on his habit, and even said in his episode that it wasn't even really affecting him financially. We've had other people that don't make that much money, that just 2 or 3 shots a day can bankrupt them. So it's really all over the map. And I think the other thing I'd say is there's often this perception in the recovery community, whether it's kratom or alcohol or other drugs, you have to hit rock bottom or maybe you're not as bad as something, or an addict is someone that's homeless that's under a bridge, and that's not the case. Your rock bottom or what your point of breaking could be very different from someone else. And, there's no point at which you shouldn't feel like that is enough or that it hasn't gotten bad enough, or that you have to justify your addiction because if it's affecting you negatively, that's really all that's important.
Oh, absolutely. And just on something you said earlier, I think it's interesting because you and I and some of the other people in this community, a common tool we'll use for quitting is to build out a list of everything we don't like about it. And one of those things is, more often than not, something I hear every single day is, it's so expensive and I can't afford this addiction anymore. And I think that's one of the things that really gets people going. Because if you can't afford to eat, I think poverty is a very, very powerful motivator for getting rid of your addiction. But what's also interesting is that when you do have the money, that can also be very challenging, because the motivator to quit from a financial basis isn't there. You have the money to spend on kratom. So you have to look at other motivators in your life that aren't financial. And that's always something that I thought was kind of fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating. The degree of expense with kratom is so vast, because you can buy a kilo of powder, and if that's all you use, it's actually, compared to a lot of other addictions, it could be relatively inexpensive. If you start on the extract products or the 7-OH products, it could be the most expensive addiction out there. So it's just all over the place.
Yes, it is. Yeah, well, thank you for joining me, Jacob. This has been an interesting discussion, and I am excited to listen to your interview.
Great. Well, thank you.
Of course.
Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. My name is Jacob, and this evening I have the pleasure of talking to John. John, how are you, man?
I'm good. I'm glad to be on here. I've been a long time listener. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it's like a dream come true for me to be on this podcast. I remember the first time I found it, thinking to myself, one day I'm going to be sober enough to be on that podcast. And as crazy as that sounded in the moment, I've made it here. So I'm doing great, man.
Awesome. Well, we're really glad that you could make it, and thanks for doing it. So, John, how would you introduce yourself to the audience? Things like your name, your profession, age, family, anything you want to tell us.
My name is John. I'm a 24-year-old. I live in Northern Virginia, Loudoun County to be exact. I'm a teacher assistant. I come from a family of teachers. Outside of that, I'd say I'm a pretty normal guy. I've got a girlfriend I love very much, a family I love very much that's very supportive. I try to spend a lot of time outside when I can. I'm also very, very big into my music, which is funny because as big of a music fan as I am, I'm pretty, I guess, closed-minded in the sense that it's harder for me to introduce new music to what I like to listen to and whatnot, but that's just a little bit about me. Pretty normal dude.
Awesome. So that's great. What do you like to do for fun? What kind of hobbies do you have?
Recently, my girlfriend and I have kind of set this goal of trying to visit all of the national parks in the United States. We're not very far on that yet. We haven't gone to any, but right now we're in the process of planning out a bunch of trips. So for me, being outdoors is a big hobby of mine, whether that's hiking, whether that's just going for a walk, whether that's playing sports outside, shooting hoops, you name it. Just being outside is what I like to do. I work 9 to 5, so a lot of the time, if I'm not outside, then I'm working or sleeping. I'm a little bit of a gamer as well. Not so much in the last few months, but definitely since I've gotten out of rehab, I've picked that up a lot more. So a gamer, an outdoorsman, and I'd say that my job as a teacher is also something that I look at as a hobby as well. It's not really work to me. It's something that I enjoy waking up and doing every day. I think it helps me as a person to become a better person. So my job as a teacher is a big part of my identity.
That's awesome. We need more people to do the teaching profession. I know it's
I agree.
not the highest paid profession out there, but it's really important.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Glad that you're doing that. Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about how you found yourself in Kratom and how that kind of worked out?
All right. In high school, prior to my junior year of high school, I was as straight of a stick when it comes to sobriety as you could be. If someone in my life that I knew, a friend, was like smoking weed or something like that, I was the kind of dude to be like, I don't know if we can be friends anymore. You're using drugs or whatnot. I got into pot the summer going into my junior year of high school, and that kind of progressed slowly at first. Like I'd not smoke for a couple of months until that escalated and turned into an everyday thing. And then once I got to college, that's when everything didn't really switch to the negative stuff, but that's when I was introduced to harder drugs. So my second or third day of college, I'm sitting in my suite mate's room, and he opens his hand and there's these green pills in his hands. And he goes, "Here, man, take some of these." And my fresh 19-year-old brain at the time was like, "Oh, cool, man, free drugs. I'll take those." And I tried it. And I didn't really feel anything from that experience. I took a bunch of them from what I recall. It wasn't like, I was so used to getting high off of like pot that the high that Kratom would give you, I didn't recognize it. So at first it really wasn't an issue and was kind of just something I like to do as a social thing. We'd sit together and either take the capsules or, scoop it and chase it with water while we're watching a show or playing a video game. But it really took a couple years for it to kind of grasp hold of my life and turn into an addiction. And I think I knew that it was going to be an addiction a long time before it actually turned into one. But for the first 2 years of my use, it was pretty sporadic. I'd say I pick up a pack of Kratom every other couple of weeks, and it would take me a couple of weeks to go through it. It wasn't until my junior year of college that I had a little bit of a hardship happening. And I'll never forget that choice I made mentally in my head in that moment where I was like, I'll be fine. I have this safety blanket. I've got this great stuff. And that's when I made the switch to extracts. I won't use any of the brand names or anything like that, but the extract that I was taking, it's not the everybody's favorite Kratom Kava tonic. It's not that one. It's just another pure Kratom extract. And once I tried that, I was hooked. I remember sitting in my bedroom the first time that hit my body, and it felt like nirvana was just running through me. It felt like all of my worries were gone. Any physical ailments I was having was gone. And at the time, I was just too naive to understand if I escalate this and continue using this every day, there's going to be repercussions. My best friend in college, his name is Sam, he warned me about it. He had been to rehab himself a couple of times, and he told me that, you got to be careful with this stuff. And me being the, iron-headed person that I was, I either didn't listen or just thought I was immune. I thought I could take it, and because I could put the powder down, I'd be fine. Why would it be any different with the extracts? And from there, it really snowballed. I stayed on the extracts for, I'd say, about a year and a half or 2 years before I switched to the newer stuff, 7-OH, and I thought that I could use 7-OH to get off of the extracts that I was using. And at first, that was great. It was working out until you run out of that stuff. And then, as we all know, those withdrawals and everything hits you like a truck, and you realize, like, fuck, like I'm in deep. I might need help getting out of this. And that was a really scary moment for me. And I didn't experience that moment until, for the first time, really just a couple months ago, before I went to rehab, because I always made sure that I had my fix in one way or another, whether that's getting money through unconventional methods or asking people for money in my life or whatnot. I always made sure that I had my fix. So withdrawals were not an issue until I started the 7-OH stuff and was like, okay, I can probably go a day without taking this. I should start weaning down, and was very wrong about that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I luckily got out before the 7-0 stuff became popular, but yeah, that sounds like a rough ride, man. I'm glad that you were able to get through it. About how long in that journey, just from like start to finish, was your total usage, just to kind of help the listeners a bit?
I started using my freshman year of college, which would have been 2020, and I stopped using on May 3rd of this year was the last day that I used. So just about 5 years.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I had kind of a similar time period of usage for myself. Let's see. Did you have any history of addiction before Kratom or anything like that?
So to preface everything, I'm adopted. One of 4 boys. We're all adopted. So I did not know anything about my birth family's history or medical history until I turned 18 years old, because it was a closed adoption. But I had started vaping when I was must have been my freshman or sophomore year of high school. And from the second I started doing that, I haven't essentially put it down since. That has been the longest, outside of the Kratom, the longest vice that I've had to deal with the nicotine. And then I know people say you can't get addicted to pot, but as someone who needed that to sleep and to function, I can tell you that I was absolutely addicted to pot as well. So going to rehab a couple weeks ago was like a double whammy for me, because it got rid of, or at least it put me on the right path to handle my Kratom problem. And then it also helped me to curb the THC usage that I was doing as well, which was every day. I was using them together to kind of compound the feelings. But it got to a point where I wasn't really one to use one without the other until I was, when I had to make the choice, got $30 in my pocket. Do I want to go buy more THC or do I want to go buy my Kratom? I won't have enough money for both. And I picked Kratom. So Kratom to me became definitely the strongest and the biggest of that 3-headed drug dragon of nicotine, pot, and Kratom for me. But my family, birth family, definitely does have a very strong history of addiction. So I didn't know this until I was 18, but my birth mother did like every drug under the sun that you could possibly do and that you should not do while she was pregnant with me. So I was born as a crack baby. There's a whole like packet of information that they gave my family that I was able to read when I turned 18 about the first 9 months of my life, and just how even as a baby, I was going through withdrawals. They had to like keep me in a dark room, had to wrap me up for sensitivity and stuff like that. So biologically, addiction is riddled all over my birth family. My adopted family, I won the lottery. They're the greatest people that I know. They've always been there for me. All of them are sober. They've all got good heads on their shoulders, and they've been very supportive about my recovery, even though they don't understand it at all. They don't have any experience with addiction. So for them, it's like an alien experience. And that was hard for me to kind of wrap my head around while I was going through it, kind of expecting everybody to, kneel to my needs and whatnot and help me through recovery. And it didn't dawn on me that I've done as much damage to my family through this addiction as I've done to myself. They've had to watch me go from this bright, young academic kid who had a promising future to just a shadow of myself, just living in a shell, never showing up for anything. So biologically, my family's riddled with addiction. My adoptive family, on the other hand, is probably the best family that I could have asked for.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you had to go through that experience as a baby. Not that you knew, but yeah, that probably had some impact on your subconscious, and then it impacted you into the future. But yeah, that's great to hear that you've got a good support system with your family and all that. So what is your Kratom abstinence date, since you mentioned you went through the rehab?
March 3rd was the last time that I used Kratom, and then I went to rehab on March 4th. So yeah, 3/3 is my sobriety date.
3/3, wow. So well, you're coming up on almost 2 months now. That's awesome.
Yeah, getting ready to go pick up that 60-day chip, which, again, as somebody who was in a position where I could not live without the drug and I could not live with the drug because it was destroying my life, to hear myself say that I'm, almost 2 months clean from that is almost like a dream. It's not a position that I ever thought that I'd be in, as I'm sure many of the people that you've interviewed and many of the people who are probably listening are probably in similar positions. I didn't see myself as someone who could ever get sober. I was prepared to always be using this every day to make sure that I wasn't going through withdrawals and to make sure that I was feeling okay.
That's great. Yeah, glad that you were able to get through that and are on the straight and narrow. So what was your rehab experience like? How did you, I guess, decide to go? And then what was it like when you went?
So this awesome podcast, you should give it a listen. The Kratom Sobriety Podcast was definitely a major player in me wanting to get sober. I was like 2 years ago when I was just using the extracts, and I was living at my dad's house. They knew that I was using that stuff. They'd go through my room, they'd find the stuff, they'd ask me why I can't stop and all that kind of stuff. And one night it got to a boiling point, and my dad said, "You have a choice. You can either go to rehab and we'll pay for it, or you can find somewhere else to live." And I laughed. I laughed as my stepmom stood there and cried. And my dad, I could see the soul leave his body after I started laughing. It was like, I don't need rehab. This stuff is legal. It's not doing anything to me. I can stop anytime I want to, and all that bullshit we tell ourselves. And I moved out. And it turns out, as an addict, I could not, in fact, make it on my own. I pretty much bounced around the basements of some family friends. My mom was like a hero at that time period. I would not have had anywhere to go had she not had such a network of people that I could fall back and rely on. So I kind of floated around, lived in the basements of some family friends, and then moved into a house with my childhood best friend and a couple other friends from high school. And as cool as that setup was, it was all downhill. And it became very evident that if I did not go to rehab, nothing was going to change. And this is over 2 years from when I got kicked out of my dad's house until making the choice. So I knew consciously the only way for me to get clean was for me to go to rehab. I just had that stubborn addict mindset where I thought I was better than that. I didn't need that. Let me try one more time to quit on my own. All those things that we tell ourselves. So listening to your podcast, and specifically the experiences of others who had gone to rehab, episode, I think it's 83, Frank, I think that's his name that you interviewed, was huge into my decision into going to rehab. So if you're out there, Frank, and you're still listening, thank you, because it was your interview that I was working at Safeway, listening to your interview and just how crazy, like fucked up, like your life had gotten. And it clicked for me in that moment where I was like, holy shit, like I'm sitting here with a smile on my face about how this guy's going through hell, and I'm in the same position. I'm going through the same stuff. Like I'm listening to this dude's story as if it's like entertainment to me. And in reality, I'm living my own nightmare. So that for me was really the first moment that I was like, okay, let's get the ball rolling. It must have been no more than a week or two after that, I sent my dad a big old message being like, hey, like I'm not doing well. Told him all the things that was going on physically. Like I had started developing liver spots on my arms, on my legs, all over my body. My eyes were like stained yellow. I did not look like a healthy human being. And I told him on top of that, I wasn't taking care of myself and I needed help. And I don't know what I expected their help to be, but they thank God for them being the way that they are. They told me to meet them after work that day at a restaurant in town. I met up with them. I let it all out with them in person, cried harder than I'd ever cried before. And that was unexpected of me. I'm really like a pretty emotionally numb person, or at least that's what the Kratom made me feel like. So to feel that strong of emotion when talking about my experience over the last couple of years was also just reinforcing the idea that I needed rehab and I needed it badly. So that same day, right after dinner, we went out to my car. We called the rehab place that I went to, found out they had a bed. And I think it was a week and a half after that, I was on my way down to rehab. The experience itself was beautiful. I was scared shitless for the first couple of nights there. I remember trying to find my counselor there and asking her if I could have a phone pass so I could just text my parents or something, and I'd get my phone and be like, oh my God, you need to come get me. This is terrible. These people are not treating me good. I need you to rescue me. I'm not going to make it here. Yada, 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 all that stuff. And I'm glad that my dad is the way that he is, because my girlfriend was willing to listen to me and come pick me up, and she was ready to do that. And something told her to text my parents beforehand, and she did. And my dad was like, don't you do it. You stay put. He's got to go through this. This is his journey that he needs to go through. And if he comes home, he's in the same place that he was before then. And from that point on, I think it was the third day of rehab, it was the best experience of my life. And I'll tell that to anybody. The medication there, that was a little iffy. It was complicated at some points, but just the people, the classes I had to take, the environment, the counselors, the coaches and everything, it was absolutely the best thing I could have done and the only thing I feel I could have done in order to get sober. I still talk to a lot of the people that I went to rehab with. I know it hasn't been that long since I've been out, but I look at these people as if they're going to be lifelong friends, and I really think they do, or they will be, because when you're an addict and you're living this just terrible like double life, really, where no one else knows that you're fiending all the time for this kind of stuff and like what's really going on inside your head, and for the first time you're introduced to other people like that. There's a saying in the NA and AA preamble where the power of an addict helping another addict is like unmatched or something like that, and I fully experienced that in rehab. And I also knew going into it I was going to get out of it what I put into it. So if I went down there and was half-assing it and knew that if I get out of here I was going to use again, then I wouldn't have got anything out of it. But I'm one of the kind of people, like Frank said in his interview, that never wants to fucking go to rehab again, as good of an experience as it was. Yeah. So I was journal in hand, pen in hand, writing down everything that I could, phone numbers from people to call, just taking in all the resources that I could, knowing that my real battle with this addiction was going to start the second that I stepped out of that rehab. But the rehab itself was a fantastic experience. If anybody out there is on the fence about going to rehab or considering it or worried about it, I will tell you, do your research before you go to a rehab so you know kind of what you're getting. But at least for me, it was absolutely the best thing that I could have done to make my experience in recovery as painless as possible.
That's great. I'm glad that you were able to have a really good experience. Everybody that I've talked to that's had the opportunity to go to rehab, I haven't heard anybody that said it wasn't a good experience. What were the withdrawals like since you were on the 7-0 at the end there?
So I truly don't think that I ever experienced like just normal Kratom withdrawals. I truly think that I was always able to make sure that I had that extract in my hand before the withdrawals hit. So I didn't even like withdrawals were out of my mind until the 7-0 stuff. Those were another beast. I will not forget the first moment or the first morning that I woke up. I started out the 7-0 stuff. I was taking a shot version of it, and it was like liquid morphine. It was crazy. And I remember I had started taking those daily, obviously, and there was just one morning where I didn't feel like picking it up on the way to work. It was, man, it must have been no more than like 30 minutes after like my usual dose time in the morning that hit like a train. Sweat, the anxiety that everybody talks about, just like world shattering paralyzing anxiety. The lack of ability to control my temperature was something that really, really like bothered me as well, because as somebody who has a panic disorder, when I feel myself start to sweat, that's typically a sign that I'm anxious, and that snowballs and builds on itself into just a full-blown panic attack. So feeling myself get hot, feeling the sweat coming down my face just would kickstart me into an even like a deeper panic. The restlessness was probably my least favorite part of it, just not being able to sleep. And this is prior to going to rehab. This is all just the one or two times that, well, not the one or two, I tried a handful of times to quit 7-OH on my own. But those are the main ones that were really, really killing me. Like there was one morning where I didn't sleep, obviously, and I was not in pain, but just so damn uncomfortable that I literally was just I shouted into my pillow down there in the basement when I was still staying with my best friend, because I didn't know what else to do. I was down there shouting like, somebody help me. Like, I don't know what's going on, but it was the kind of feeling that you get, and you know that you will do anything under the sun to make sure that you never feel that way again. And initially when that fork in the road popped up where it was quit now and get through these, or keep taking it just to stave it off until next time, I caved in the moment or the moments and continued to buy every single time just to stave the withdrawals off, which is, of course, a vicious cycle in itself, because the more you use, the worse those withdrawals are going to be and the longer you're prolonging that stuff. And so the withdrawals were terrible. At rehab, I only had to go through withdrawals for, I'd say, 4 or 5 days total. The first 2 days I was there, I was unmedicated from like the mat stuff that we talk about, like subs.
Yep.
They were just giving me comfort meds for my stomach, for the anxiety, which of course didn't do really much. And so I had to advocate real hard to see the doctor at the facility and say, hey, I think I need Suboxone. I had done a little bit of research prior to it and found out that some people use that to quit. I truly felt like that was my only shot. And when I told him about that, he was like, we don't do Suboxone for Kratom. And I was ready to go to war in that moment. I'm like in full-blown withdrawal, sitting there shaking, sweating in his office. And I'm like, look up 7-OH right fucking now on your computer and then tell me if I don't need this stuff. And he looked it up and basically was like, dude, you're taking like legal heroin. He was like, we usually don't give Suboxone out for Kratom users, but this stuff seems to be completely separate from Kratom, or maybe not completely separate, but separate and strong enough to the point that subs would work and they were an option. The fear that he had was if he gave me subs, would it send me into precipitated withdrawals? And that it did. I took the subs and I was like, cool, these withdrawal symptoms are going to be gone now. And within 30 minutes, my stomach was in absolute turmoil. And that was the start of the hardest night of my stay at rehab, where I could not stop throwing up. I had nothing in my stomach. It was just bile, and even when I couldn't get bile out, it was dry heaving so bad to the point that my roommates, shout out to Rudy and Eric, who were also going through their own alcohol withdrawal at the time, were pulling their asses out of bed and running down the hallway to tell the nurses, like, you got to check on this kid. Like, we're pretty sure he's dying. And the nursing staff, God bless their souls, they're great. I'm sure the reason they were so calm with this is because they deal with people who are coming off of stuff like heroin, fentanyl, and other kinds of crazy hard stuff. They were just like, oh, he'll be fine. Keep an eye on him. I was not fine. And by the end of the night, I ended up in the ER because I couldn't stop throwing up. So finally that calmed down. The next day was just nausea, a lot of sweats. And then the day after that, it was like, it felt like the chains were gone. As long as I had that strip under my tongue, I was fine. And I never got that like high feeling that I guess some people can get when they abuse Suboxone. For me, it never did that. And I was so thankful for that, because if I would have taken that strip and felt some kind of euphoria or something like that, then I would have been writing my own funeral right there in the spot. That would have been just my next fix coming out. But for me, all the Suboxone did was stop the withdrawals. That's all I needed to really would get through it. I promised myself and everybody around me that if I could just get through the withdrawals, I would never pick that stuff up again. And I'm sure nobody in my life, or at least close life, believed me, because, we're addicts. And I'm sure that every addict out there has probably said that at least 100 times before. But yeah, once the Suboxone started working on like the third or fourth day, it was smooth sailing physically from that point on, and just about collecting the mental tools that I need to beat the urges and making sure that that was all set up in my head and my support system and everything when I got out of there.
Okay. Did you do a rapid taper of Suboxone, or did you decide to do the maintenance?
Yeah, so they gave me a rapid taper at first, and for the first time in my life, I was not, after the taper ended in like 7 days, I was not dependent on anything, and it felt great. I asked them to put me on extended because I knew that if I were to leave rehab, at least in that moment, I would go and use again.
Yeah.
And knowing that if I was on the Suboxone for a little while, all that would happen is I would go into precipitated withdrawal again, or I wouldn't feel the effects. That was enough for me to be like, yes, I want to stay on that for a little bit to kind of keep that maintenance going until I know mentally that I'm good to jump off of this and I can, those urges won't be a problem for me. So today I'm still taking my extended Suboxone and I plan on tapering that down come the end of the month.
Okay. I'm a full supporter of medicated assisted treatment. I think, there's a lot of studies that show prolonged usage of opiates and opiate-like drugs like Kratom or 7-OH definitely do mental changes. And, it's not for everybody, but, it works. And if it works for you and allows you to, build the tools you need to be able to enter long-term recovery, or if you need it for years or whatever, that's your choice to make. I'm glad that they were able to get you the treatment you needed.
Absolutely.
So now that you're about getting up close to 2 months here, what was it like at the 30-day mark? How's it been now that you've exited rehab and you've gotten back into real life?
It was great. It was like a movie walking out of that. And I know that was definitely the pink cloud. So I don't want to, give a disclaimer out there that this is just my experience. I've listened to plenty of interviewees talk about how at the 30-day mark, they were still mentally in hell. For me, walking out of that rehab, and that might have just been the fact that I had been away from loved ones and cooped up in there for a month, but I felt fantastic. That ride home, that 3.5-hour ride home through the mountains of Virginia back up north, was enchanting. So I had heard music at rehab, obviously, but to hear music that I could pick, like my kind of songs and stuff like that, it was like hearing songs for the first time again. So getting out of rehab, I was great. I was ready to go to all my meetings. I was ready to, start getting back into my friend groups and stuff. That pink cloud was about as big as the sun when I walked out of there on 30 days. And it wasn't until really the 40-day mark that I really had my first major mental obstacle where the pink cloud just, evaporated. And it was up to me and the tools that I had and my higher power to make sure that I'm not using or I don't go back to use. But the 30-day mark for me, I specifically remember thinking I don't know what all these other people in the quitting Kratom sub were talking about. I'm feeling great right now. All these people are talking about it taking months to feel normal. And I'm feeling great. Maybe that's because of the medically assisted treatment at rehab. Maybe that's because of the Suboxone. I don't know. But I know that at 30 days when I got out of there, I was feeling like a brand new person. It was the first time in 5, honestly, probably 6 or 7 years that I wasn't on any substances at all. And it felt like I was a brand new person. It felt like God had given me a second chance. The sun was a little brighter. Grass looks a little greener. So yeah, I was definitely riding that pink cloud pretty heavy around the 30-day mark.
That's awesome. Glad to hear that you were able to get out of rehab and continue and feeling good about yourself. You mentioned tools and what you learned. What tools are you using now, or do you plan to use moving forward to stay sober and make sure that you're able to continue with long-term recovery?
The biggest thing in the rehab program for me, it was a 12-step rehab program, so meetings. So I prefer to go to the AA meetings only because they're much easier to find in my area. The crowds are a little bigger in my area, and it just feels like a little bit stronger of a community as opposed to the NA meetings. But meetings have been and are going to be a major role player in my sobriety moving forward. I'll be honest, in the last couple weeks, I've been slacking a little bit at the in-person meetings. I still always try and get onto a Zoom meeting, but it's definitely been a little bit of a struggle going to some of the in-person meetings. Luckily, the group that I consider my home group is fucking fantastic. I went to my first meeting there, and by the end of the meeting, I had a spot. I wasn't even looking for a sponsor. They told us to raise our hand if we were new, asked if I had a sponsor, told me to see him after the meeting, and I've been calling this dude ever since then, every day, and he's been such a big help. So meetings, calling people, which can be very difficult if you're reserved or like an isolated person. Those have definitely been things that really, really help, because when you want to use and that thought pattern comes in, you got to do exactly the opposite of what your mind is telling you. And for me, that's picking up the phone and calling somebody or going to find a meeting. So meetings have definitely been a big thing for me. I'm a very spiritual person, so I try to meditate when these feelings come in. It was difficult at first to feel those urges come in mentally, and instead of acting on it, have to sit with it and be like, okay, I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling like I want to use, and have to, kind of unwrap that strand, go down the line and ask myself, why am I feeling this way? What's it going to benefit for myself if I go and use, play the tape forward? So a lot of my tools are just basic tools that you see people saying in the sub and whatnot that just happen to work for me. But I'd say for sure the biggest tool has been meetings and the support that I've got from the people in those groups. It's been otherworldly, and I just love the notion that at any time I can find a meeting somewhere and walk in there and end up trusting those people in that room more than I trust a lot of the people that I see in my day-to-day life, and know that these people are sharing a common struggle with me. And that's unfortunately a very ugly struggle that unless you're an addict or related to an addict and seeing somebody go down that path, that it's hard to connect to someone who hasn't been through that. So the meetings and just being introduced to the fact that there's hundreds of thousands of people out there just like me has been the biggest help, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's great. I think working a program, whether that's a 12-step program like you, or Smart Recovery, Dharma Recovery, Kratom Quitters meetings, whatever it is, I think it's a really important step and to get grounded. And like you said, finding a sponsor and building that community that'll serve you well as you, grow into a long-term sobriety and get to that 60-day, 90-day, a year, 2 years mark, which I think if you just keep going, you'll get there.
Absolutely.
So now that you've gone through this experience and you're on the other side of it and starting to move from early recovery into medium range recovery and ultimately into long range recovery, if someone was to come to you and have a similar story, if they were struggling with Kratom or 7-OH, would there be one top tip that you might give them, or what would you advise them to do?
Yeah, and I think that I've heard this from another interviewee as well, but find the person in your life that you least want to know about your addiction and struggles, and tell that person and make a commitment to that person that you are going to start taking the steps to get clean. Until you tell somebody that you're embarrassed to know that you're an addict, I truly feel like you won't really be ready to make that change. So for me, it was letting my dad know, hey, yeah, you're right. I'm a full-blown addict. I cannot stop taking this stuff, and I need to be held accountable. I need people to see me, and I need people to make sure that I'm holding myself accountable. So my number one advice for someone or anybody in our situation is find someone that you can trust, but someone that would not be proud or happy of what you're doing, and tell that person. Because if it's a loved one, that loved one, if they really love you, they'll make sure that you're doing what you have to. Those people will fight harder than a lot of us fight for ourselves to keep us sober. I remember prior to going to rehab, and just when I was still taking the extracts and stuff like that, my dad would go through my room and all these crazy measures to make sure that I wasn't using. And back then, I'm all like, oh man, he's a dick. Why is he punishing me? Doing all this stuff. And now I'm sitting here and every time I see him, I almost get tears in my eyes. And I'm like, you really do love me. You made sure that even when I couldn't see it myself, that you did your best to put me on the right track and keep that poison out of my body. So telling somebody that you love and someone that is important to you, in my opinion, is the first step, besides admitting that you have a problem, to really, really being able to take that accountability and get clean.
Yeah, I love the way you phrased that. So many guests, and I've said this myself like probably 100 times now, you got to tell someone, but the way you specifically said it, you have to tell like the person that you the least want to tell, that you'd be the most embarrassed about. I think that's really powerful, because it's called burning the ships. When you tell someone, you can't untell them. And
yep.
You feel that shame pretty much up until the words come out of your mouth. Then it's like you feel nothing but relief. I mean, you still feel the shame, but the relief is the more overwhelming feeling that hits you.
I had never told a partner of mine about, so I had dated two people through the thick of my addiction, and neither of them knew that I was on that stuff. I hid it from everybody, essentially. And the partner that I'm with now, God bless her soul, she's about as sober as you can get. She's a nurse. So anytime that drugs are brought up or health or whatever, she'll scold the shit out of me for drinking a soda and tell me that she needs me around when, we're 60 or whatever, and I don't need to die of a heart attack. So for me, it's close between my dad and her, but I'd say she for sure was definitely the person that I needed to tell. And it just, it wasn't planned. It just happened. One night we were out. She had just finished working, and we were going to go to Walmart after. And I got into Walmart, and boom, the withdrawals hit. I'm sweating. I'm shaking. I'm hot as balls. And she's watching me do this. And I can't just, oh, I'm anxious. Don't worry about me. So I left the store while she was still in there, went to my car, and she came out, sits in the car with me after, and just gave me this look that was straight to my soul, that I owe it to this woman to tell this woman what's going on. And if she and I and our love is really true, then she'll be there for me throughout the whole journey. And if she's not, then okay, I'll figure it out. But I know that I needed to tell somebody, and I just let it out. I told her what I was struggling with. I told her that the feelings, the sweat, all that stuff that she had been seeing me go through, and the irritability was all from withdrawals. And I think it was such a shock to her that night she was very, very kind about it. Very oh, it's okay. We'll figure it out. The next couple of days were a little rockier with kind of coming to terms with whether or not that's something that she wanted to have to deal with or whatever. And in the end, she chose to stand by me and stick by me. And she has been my strongest soldier. I love her more than I can find the words for. And this experience of recovery and experiencing that with somebody that you love in that way instead of by yourself is so powerful. I love just thinking about my progression. So I can't even imagine what it's like for her to see me go from this husk of a person that she met and somehow fell for to, the bright and energetic person that I'm still becoming today, and kind of becoming the person that I always was before drug use. So she was definitely that person for me that I needed to tell, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, that's good. I bet that she's very thankful that you opened up to her. That probably, causes a bit of stress in the relationship, but in the long term, I think it's healthy and it allows you to build a solid relationship through trust and accountability.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, you're about 2 months in, as we've been talking, or almost to 2 months. What's your life like now that you're off Kratom, and now that you're out of rehab and back to teaching and doing your thing?
So like I said, at first when I got out of rehab, it was like I was a kid again, and every day was Christmas. All these mundane, normal things that I couldn't do while I was an addict, spend money on food and just normal things, because I wasn't eating. It was great. The last 2 or 3 weeks, things have kind of slowed down a little bit and returned back to what I can expect normal life to be like. You're not always going to wake up and jump out of bed into your shoes and ready to win the day. Some days you're going to wake up and not want to get out of bed at all. And it's on those days and the bad ones where the obstacles pop up that you really need to make sure that your tools are set and you have the right mindset on how to tackle that addiction. One of my favorite things I heard in rehab is that addiction is like this monkey in the back of your head that's always there, just getting fucking jacked. And you forget about it when you get in early sobriety until it punches you right in the mouth again and you remember how hard it is. And that has been the most true thing I think that I heard while at rehab. It was going from, yeah, I'm fixed, I'm feeling great, I never have to worry about that again, to all of a sudden you get just a little whiff of that fucking jacked ass monkey in the back of your head that's been just waiting for you to slip up again. And you realize this is a lifelong battle. So since realizing that there is no cure, there is no being fixed, it's a lifelong recovery, it's been a little scarier knowing that one slip up could send me right back into where I was. Outside of that, I've loved every second of sober life since getting out of rehab. Even just moments like these, sitting outside, just being in nature, listening to the birds, everything just feels to me more, I guess, real is the word that I'm looking for now that I'm sober. I felt so disconnected from myself. I was always watching myself from third person when I was using. And now it's I'm back in first person and everything feels so much more real to me. It's all like I'm there when I'm laughing with people. I'm not just watching myself laugh at people or laughing along with people. I'm genuinely laughing my ass off for the first time in years. This is a moment in rehab. One of my definitely going to be lifelong friends, Brandon, in rehab. And There was something he said in rehab that made me laugh so hard that my stomach had hurt. And like, I don't think I had laughed that hard since I was in high school. So it's those moments like those where you lose the drug that you were taking every day, but you gain your feelings back. You gain your sense of humor back. You gain all these emotions come back to you. And I'll pick those over numbing myself any day. So life may not be as fun as it was prior to going to rehab, but it's more colorful to me now, and it's more real to me now. And that's what matters.
Yeah. Life is a series of ups and downs and various, emotional states, and can be a lot of fun, can sometimes be a little challenging, but it's easier to get through when you're not clouding yourself with a bunch of Kratom or 7-OH every day.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a couple more questions, and then I think we'll wrap up here. I'll ask you maybe something fun. You're wearing a Pink Floyd t-shirt, so...
Oh, absolutely, man. That's my favorite band of all time right there.
All right, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, have you ever seen them live, or is there a cool concert that you want to talk about?
So I feel like I'm too young to have seen the full band and all of their members in their glories. But when I was in high school, there was my friend group, a little cult of us who I had infected with my Pink Floydness. And we went to go see this cover band called Brit Floyd in Baltimore. And oh man, what an experience that was. We were the youngest people in the entire theater or whatever, but it was the time of our life, laughing with a bunch of old heads who were... Some of them were tripping on acid. A lot of them were high out of their minds. And it was such a great experience. That's the closest I've come to seeing them in person. I would love to go see that cover band again. They were fantastic. They did all of the show that Pink Floyd's album, The Wall, is like a whole kind of show to it pretty much. And they did like the light show. They did the scenes and everything. It was fantastic. Pink Floyd definitely dominates my music taste and my music sense for sure.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you got to experience that concert. Sounds like it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you were thinking about maybe dabbling with a book or something in the long term. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So that really just started the second that I realized what I had gotten myself into with this 708 stuff. And I realized, this isn't just some smoke shop drug that you can pick up and put down or whatever. This has started a lifelong battle that you're going to have to fight for the rest of your life. And for me, that was such just a shattering thought that I was like, you know what? I'm stronger than this, and I'm going to beat it. And not only that, but I'm going to record my experience and write my experiences, the good, the bad. And I hope to one day, I don't know if I'll publish that into the form of an actual book or maybe an article or a series of articles or something like that. But really, I just wanted to document my experience as somebody who was on the straight path, went completely in the opposite direction to the point that I didn't think there was any hope. A lot of my friends didn't think that there was any hope for me, and they didn't even know what was going on. Back to where I am now, I feel like that's the kind of story that could change somebody's life. And there's hundreds and thousands and probably millions of us over the world who are addicts who have recovered and are recovering. So it's not anything special, but as a lot of people say, if I can just help one person to turn the opposite direction and not go through what I went through, then I've won, and I'm happy with that. So right now, it's still kind of just me daily writing down how I'm feeling, what I'm doing, events of the day and whatnot. As time goes on, I would like to clean that up a little bit, like I said, and kind of just, even if it doesn't turn out to be like a published book, I want it to be a story that I can pick up and read and reflect on and remember, so that when I have years of sobriety down the road, it doesn't seem too distant. I can pick that book up and see right back into just how bad the experiences were. And there is plenty of writings in there. It was hard to do that when going through withdrawal, but there's plenty of writings in there, very, very vulgar ones, describing how I'm feeling and cussing future myself out if I'm ever considering picking up or using again or something like that. So it really just started out as me trying to just document my experience as an addict and into recovery, and turned into something where I realized if I do it right, I can use this as a tool to help people and as a way to give back to the community that really helped me when I didn't have anybody else. So I'd say it's still definitely in its very, very early stages, but I'm taking my time with it. Recovery takes time. It's not something that you want to rush through, and I'm not going to rush through my recovery on the account of trying to get something published or just, trying to put something out there. I'm going to, take my time with it, and what feels right feels right, when it feels like it's time to turn that into something, then whether that's a book or who knows, maybe even a documentary film in the distant future, then yeah, I would go with that. But right now, it's just important to me to make sure I'm documenting my experiences.
Yeah, man, that's a great point. I journal a lot myself. I was actually not too long ago looking back at some stuff from like 10 years ago, and I was struggling with a different problem. And, just reading that, I was like, man, I'm so glad I'm not going through that now. And it was just nice to kind of think about it a little bit in a more positive light.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this has been really good. I think there's a lot of really good insights in here. And I think a rehab experience is going to be great for our listeners, and hopefully we'll resonate with some folks just like Frank's resonated with you. And maybe we'll get some other folks that are struggling out there to take the leap and, get some help if that's what you ultimately need. There's no shame in that. And like you said, it's a life-changing experience. I guess before we wrap up, is there any other questions that you maybe wish I asked that you wanted to address with the audience, or anything you wanted to dive into, or any questions you have for me?
No, I think I just want to put the recap out there real quick to let people know that I know I kind of floated over the thick of my addiction, but to be very clear that it was the darkest time in my life, as I'm sure it is for a lot of people who are out there in that now. So I want to be very clear when I say that if you are someone who's out there who's at a point in their life where you cannot live with your drug of choice, whether that's Kratom or alcohol or whatever, and you can't live without it, and you're kind of at what we call the jumping off point in AA, there is hope. There's no words really that can describe what it's like to be in a place that dark and that deep, but the power that comes from being heard and being seen and knowing that other people out there are going through or have gone through exactly what you're going through is unmatched. So I guess I want to make my mark to let people know that I see you. I pray for you. When I go to meetings and we take a moment of silence for people who aren't in the rooms or can't make it, I'm thinking of all those people that are out there. And I feel like that's something that I'm going to do until the day I die. I knew that leaving rehab, that was a place that I want to go back and work one day. Haven't finished my degree. I'm a semester away. Drugs got in the way of that, and I took a gap year and fell in love with teaching. So I'm still trying to figure out how to get back and finish that last semester up. But my degree was in psych, and once I get that degree, because I'm going to get it, I want to go back to that rehab center that I was at, and I want to be one of the coaches or counselors, because there's a profound power, and when someone's there to help you, and not only that, but when that person has gone through what you've gone through or worse, it's the closest thing to an angel coming down and reaching their hand out to you as I can get. So if you're out there and you're struggling and you don't think that there's any light at the end of the tunnel, you are listening to somebody who numerous times was at the verge where I didn't think life was worth living anymore. And I'm here to tell you that even just, 50-something days into my sobriety, I'm 1,000 times better than I was any day that I was using. And all it takes is that first step. All it takes is that first step of admitting that you need help and telling somebody to get you on that right path. And if you've got the right people around you, you'll be okay. And if you don't have the right people around you, there's great resources out there like the Quitting Kratom Sub and other places that you can find people with a common experience to help. So I guess my ending message to people is don't be afraid to ask for help. We see you. We see you. We know that you're in pain, and it will be okay. You have to put that effort in, but you will be okay. You will heal, and you will grow beautifully as a person once you start taking those steps. But you're never alone.
Yeah, I think that's a great and powerful way to close. What you said there about, it being a lifelong thing, it's scary to think about. But, and what you also said about at some point things turn on you and you're no longer able to really get joy out of the substance. And then now it's just really all becoming pain. There's a point where the party's over, and it's really kind of scary to admit that.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think for me, at least, I know the biggest hurdle I had with finally starting to get sober all those years ago, and then all the struggles to finally get to maintain sobriety, was that you have to do this forever. There's no it doesn't stop. And that sort of feels like a curse at first, but it's actually can be a blessing because it allows you to build a lot of relationships and stuff.
Yeah. Any time that I get that thought where I'm like, never using drugs again is scary as fuck. And I don't know if that's something I want to do. All I have to remember is just exactly where it put me. What is going to change this time if I go back and pick up that first drug again? What's different about me that's going to lead me to be some completely different life other than where I was, which is ending up in the gutter. So I definitely think that there is power in that as well.
Definitely. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. John, thank you so much for being willing to come on and tell your story. I'm sure this is going to be powerful and resonate with our listeners. And yeah, congrats on almost 2 months sober. Keep it going. And yeah, keep in touch, man. Let us know how you're doing. And I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you for having me on. I appreciate all of the others that I didn't get to talk to who I know are important to making this show run. I want to let you guys know you guys do God's work. And to people like me out there where there was no hope, it really means the world to be able to have this opportunity to share my story and talk to the people who meant so much to me when I was very, very early into my recovery. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening as well, Jacob.
You're welcome. Take care, buddy.
Take care.